What's going on, everybody? Feder here from 3D Print SOS. Welcome back to the channel. In today's video that's brought to you by SkillShare, we are going to be shooting lasers everywhere, hopefully in a controlled manner somewhat. In this video, we're going to be talking about the X7 Pro by AtomStack. AtomStack went ahead and sent me this machine to check out. I'm in no way obligated to say anything specific or do anything specific. And the reason why I accepted this was because I thought it'd be cool to check this thing out from a perspective of somebody who's into 3D printing, has a lot of experience with assembling and dealing with 3D printer machines. I checked this out online, and there's a ton of videos already by experienced laser engravers and the experienced people that deal with lasers all the time, and they definitely have a completely different perspective and different review of this. I'm just going into it as if I know nothing. The only other experience I've had with a assembly of a laser printer like this was a much weaker unit that was designed for Tron XY as a 1-in-3 style printer, and I did do some laser engraving with it, but it was in Inkscape and it was very rudimentary. I was able to do like an outline of my logo, for example, on top of a piece of wood, but it wasn't what I expected from laser engraving, and this is a whole different beast. This thing is a much more capable machine. It can actually, because of its 10-watt laser, can actually cut through wood that's around 1.5 inches, which is pretty thick. So I would love to learn how to fully utilize this machine and see what kind of cool projects we could do for 3D printing. This particular machine has a workable area of around 400 millimeters by 400 millimeters. I think it's a little bit less than that. But the cool thing about this is it's just extrusions. And in fact, AtomStack has a kit with belts and longer extrusions that extend this machine. And technically speaking, it's not limited just by that. If you really wanted this to be much wider and much longer, I think you could pretty easily adapt it, and not for that much money. So that's another reason why I'm really intrigued by this machine. It looks like, you know, it's a very simple construction, and it's only 2 motors pushing, 3 belts. It's a really simple way to do this type of machine. Most of it is on the software side, and that's where a lot of confusion that I had came for this machine. You're supposed to use one of 2 different types of software. One is called Laser Gerbil, and one is called Lightburn. Lightburn is a paid app. It is much more complicated, and I would compare it to like a Fusion 360 in terms of what the amount of things that it can do with this machine. And the other one, Laser Gerbil, is way more like Tinkercad. It's really basic. You can get started with it, and that's what I started with. I haven't messed with Lightburn at all yet, which I need to get into, and there is a trial, and it also works on Mac and PC, which is very nice, so I'm definitely got to check that out next. I just wanted to get my feet wet and see what it's all about. And Laser Gerbil only works on Windows, so if you have a Mac, you can run Windows through Boot Camp or run Parallels, which is actually how I've been running it on my Mac laptop. But essentially, it lets you put in files like SVGs, what I have for my logo, for example. So I took this machine and I did exactly the same thing that I do to 3D printers. I took it out of the box, I assembled it, I gathered a bunch of different materials, and I just tried, not printing, but tried engraving with it, tried some cutting, just to see what it's like. One of the things that I really like about laser engraving and cutting is that there's technically only 2 settings to mess with. There is how fast the laser is moving and how much power you're giving the laser. If you open something like Cura for 3D printing, there's so many settings to mess with. It could be really overwhelming. This is in a similar fashion overwhelming, but like I said, there's only 2 settings. So each material seems to react with it completely differently, depending if you want to cut, engrave, how deep, how fast, how many passes. There's still a lot of questions, but I really like the fact that you just control how fast and how much power. So that's really intriguing as well, and I'm excited to learn more about it. Without further ado, let's get into some of the footage I have for it. Basic assembly. I took it out to my garage. It's another thing I never thought about, is where this thing would sit. I kind of thought I'd be able to do a lot of stuff here, but it makes smoke. It is a laser beam that's extremely hot, being pointed at wood. It makes smoke. So one of the things I had to do was move it out in the garage. The downside there is it's cold right now. In the summertime it'll be great, but it's cold right now, so sitting there at nighttime trying to figure out a machine, it's not the best case scenario. Now, if you had some kind of enclosure with an exhaust so you can take these fumes out somewhere, that would be really cool. And I know AtomStack is actually about to release an enclosure for this thing. So there's a lot going on here, and spoiler alert, I think that this type of machine and this X7 Pro in general are going to be really popular. It's really easy to put together. It's really easy to operate and hop into. I think the only thing is just, you know, getting a grasp for all the software, and I'll kind of hit that a little bit later in the video. But I have my prediction is, just like 3D printers got significantly cheaper and significantly simpler and easier to put together, same thing's gonna happen with this. It's already happening now. Look at this machine. The extrusions look amazing. They feel really nice. The quality on everything is somewhat high. The only thing that's kind of questionable, in my opinion, is the way that you adjust the height of the laser. Just that screw going directly pressing up against you know, aluminum, I guess could be done better. Maybe there should be like a little stopper there, like a little flat, so it's not just a screw kind of like digging into bare aluminum. But that's really nitpicking the machine. Everything else, in terms of the construction, how quiet it is, the way that it works, there's a lot to like here. So let's get into the footage, and I'll meet you here and we'll talk about everything that you guys saw and everything that I've done on this machine so far. All right, let's get to it. Today's video is sponsored by SkillShare. It is people sharing their skills in a professional manner. I think my favorite thing about SkillShare is the fact that all the videos are broken down into sections, so you don't have to sit there in one long session. And if you click the link and sign up, you have a 1 full month of SkillShare to try out. In 1 month, you can get a lot in. There's something for everybody on SkillShare, and there's so much to learn. It's real world creatives, real world learning at your own time, at the comfort of your own home. The class that I've been watching right now is Fusion 360 for 3D printing by Vladimir Mariano, and it's been great. So sign up for a free month. In that month, you can learn a ton. You're not obligated to continue whatsoever. Just get a feel for it, and you might like it just like I did. All right, thanks, Skillshare. All right, so let's talk about some of the materials that you just saw and I messed with. The first was just some planks of wood that I have around the house. And this was just my logo engraved on a plank. What's cool about this is you can see kind of like the grains in the wood, the lines that it leaves inside. So I could see that if you go deeper, like do multiple passes, it's going to have this really rich wood effect. And like I said, this is just a scrap wood. I think this was kind of like slats for an IKEA bed or something along those lines. I have a ton of these things laying around, so why not experiment on something that I have just so I can see what I can do with it. If I build something for the garage or just some basic piece of wood out of these things, I know that I can engrave something super cool on there, like my logo, and kind of add my finishing touch to what would be like a rustic piece. Really cool there. All right, the next thing we have is I have a bunch of this, I don't know what this is called exactly, but it's 3 millimeters wide, and it's kind of like a compressed cardboard. It's you know, it's not necessarily flimsy. It's pretty sturdy, and I tried a bunch of different things with it. This was my first attempt at actually cutting through it. As you can see, it didn't actually make it all the way through. This is where I learned that I could take multiple passes through things. One of the things I did here is I also engraved it. Here is how that came out. And you can see it kind of etches right into it, basically going line by line, and it adds this really cool texture. And if you like really get in there, you can see the individual lines, which you can control, by the way. It's just a super cool texture, and I love how precise it really is. It's a high resolution engraving, which is really cool. All right, let's keep going. One of the other things that I tried to do with that material is I tried cutting it out. And like I mentioned before, I had to do several passes here, and I cut this little snowflake out. You could see like this would be a really fun and easy project to do, and it would actually make a really nice gift as a ornament. Obviously, it's holiday time right now, so something like that, you could imagine getting a really inexpensive giant sheet of this stuff, putting it under the machine and cutting a whole ton of these. People would love this. You know, your kids could color it, things along those lines. This is just a really basic version of what you can do. And this took 3 passes at a really light temperature, and you can see there's very little to no burning whatsoever, which was really nice. It took me a little bit to figure out on how to do that, but once you get it, you kind of could just set it and just let it go. Then I realized that a lot of what I see online had ways to engrave something and then cut it. This is made really easy in that second software, where you can pick different parts of the file and give it different settings. So for example, you could first engrave on something and then cut it out. In Laser Gerbil, you have to do this with separate files. You have to kind of like append them. So for example, I tried to cut out this benchy, and this 2D benchy, and I don't know if it's hard to see here, but this is a scrap, by the way, that's why you can see some stuff on there. But what I tried to do is engrave something first and then append another file to actually cut that. And this was done in one pass, and this was really, really cool. I got really excited about this. The fact that I'm actually able to do this was a big realization that I could do it in that rudimentary software, even before going a little bit more advanced. So what I did was I went out to the store and I bought a bunch more of this material, and I tried it again, and this was the result. This is where I learned that not all materials are created equal. As you can see, this one started burning around the edges, and I have a feeling that this particular material, although it's really similar, I think this stuff uses a different kind of glue, and it was almost igniting. And that brings me to a point about the machine. The only weak point so far that I've noticed is in my research, I found that there's a little bit of an air assist that you can get attached to these machines. It is basically a air pump that runs the entire time the machine does, and there's a hose that goes all the way to the tip. It's called air assist, and what it does is when things start to ignite, kind of like that did, it just puts it out the entire time. There's always a flow of cool air going where the laser is meeting the medium, whatever you're carving or cutting. And it definitely helps with things like this. One of the other things I've seen is there's this test carving that you can do that has a bunch of boxes, and each box is done in a different different speed and then at a different power, and it gives you basically a graph of what you're trying to achieve, and some go overboard, some go under. So the best part about doing a test like that on a new material is you're able to figure out exactly the setting very, very easily. That's what I need to get into, and that is really good and easy to do with light burn. It is really difficult to do something like that with laser Gerbil. Not difficult, but definitely time consuming, because each one of those squares in that test you would have to upload individually and give it settings individually. Whereas if you do it with light burn, it is a matter of selecting and giving it setting, selecting and giving it setting. And I haven't gotten access to a G file of that yet, but I will. And I think I'm going to continue working on this machine. If you guys show any interest in something like this, let me know in the comments. Throw a like. Show me with views and likes of this video that this is something you guys enjoy. And I definitely am intrigued about this entire genre. Like I said, I think mechanically it's very interesting because it's so simple in that sense, and then the fact that you can do a lot of stuff. We can make enclosures, we can make panels. For example, recently I got a board in to install into a printer, but it is such a beautiful board, I don't want to just shove it in the back on the bottom of a printer. Maybe this is a good way to cut acrylic for certain sections of 3D printing, that nature. I think this complements 3D printing very, very well, if you have the space. I have a very limited space here at this house for a ton of equipment like this, but this being so light, here, let me just put the laser back. Let me just show you what we're working with here. I mean, it weighs nothing. It's very easy to transport. One of the best parts about these things is it's not necessarily finicky in terms of alignment. It doesn't, you know, you can't make it totally sloppy and just sit there all crooked. Obviously, the laser would have different variants and heights as it's going, so having it level is important, but not in the same way as it is with 3D printing. I think it's a little bit less finicky in that sense. Obviously, it's very different. Also, let me just touch on one other thing is I tried acrylic, and that's why I wanted to get into the conversation of settings, because I completely failed. It ran so hot with the settings that I thought would work that it even warped this whole thing. It was basically cutting into the plastic. Also, it smells good. It smells like wood. It's not wood, it's plastic. Probably shouldn't be smelling it too much. But it cut into this so much that it actually melted it back together. So this is going to be my scrap piece. I have a bunch more acrylic just like this. Is 3mm acrylic. So I definitely want to get my settings right for this so that I can make a bunch of other cool stuff for you guys. And the last thing I have here is glass. Yes, this machine can etch glass. Check this out. This is a 300 by 300 piece of glass, and yes, it is off center. Yes, I misaligned it. Absolute and utter bummer. This is a glass bed for a printer. It's a 300 by 300 glass bed, and I etched it actually on the back side, so that when you put it on the machine, it is right side up. It is totally a bummer that it's off center. But the way I was able to do this is actually with paint. I bought some spray paint, just like this one right here. I spray painted the entire piece of glass. Then I used a razor blade to just clean the glass off, soapy water to get the rest of it off of these little grooves that this thing makes, and bam, etched glass. And this is really real etched glass, and it's so fun to do. And you know, this is one of those things where you can light up the bottom with LEDs and it would glow. So there's so much potential for these cool projects. For example, just in this example, you could easily design and 3D print a base for a piece of glass like this. You could make this a photo of your family. I think it complements 3D printing very well, like I mentioned. All right, let's talk about the conclusion. Oh, before I do that, one more thing. It comes with this little piece of acrylic, which I didn't know what it was at first. I thought this was like a way for them to just give you some sample material. But essentially what you do, this is how you level. Whatever material you put this thing on top of, you lay this on top of that material, you unhook the one bolt, you drop down the laser on top of this little plate, you remove the plate, and the laser is ready for printing. That's how you level this machine. It is that easy. So that's really cool. It's really easy to get going. All right, as far as my just overall thoughts on the machine, I think the firmware on it is kind of lacking. I mean, it is pretty basic in what you do. Essentially, when you put a file on the SD card, it lets you you can put I keep wanting to say print head. You can put the laser where you want it and then make that the origin. So if you have a small piece, for example, it doesn't have to be at 0, 0, which is in this front corner over here. You can put it in the middle, then you can you can move the print head manually. You can move the laser where that piece starts. You can hit the origin there, and then you can even hit center, and the head will move to the center of the piece, and you can check if that's correct. You can actually send it all the way around to show you the parameters of where it's going to print, so you can see if you have this thing centered, which is what I need to do more practice with before I jump into things like etching glass, obviously. But essentially, once you have that right, you can just hit print. It's not print. You could just hit play, which is, to start the laser going, and you can have that started and going and ready for you. So easy to get in. I think most of the hard work or hard like thinking about how this works is definitely on the software side. I think with the growing popularity and the lower costs of all of these machines that's going to be happening, I think there's going to be better and better software out there. Laser Gerbil is very rudimentary. It's almost like MS Paint in terms of how it looks. There's very little settings, although you can do a ton with it. It's all in how creative you can be with it. Almost kind of like Tinkercad is, where it's really basic, but you can make some really elaborate designs in it. Similar way there. So definitely want to check out Lightburn and really get into that, and the fact that you can do everything on one panel. You don't have to bring in multiple files and give them settings all individually without seeing the other ones before it, things of that nature. I think that's going to transform my experience. But this is my initial start with laser engraving, laser cutters, and AtomStack was gracious enough, like I mentioned, to send me this machine. But these are my thoughts, these are my opinions, this is my personal experience with it. And maybe if you're like me, if you're into 3D printing and you always wanted to check one of these out, check out this one, the X7 Pro. Seems like it has a ton of different things you could do with it, and the laser is powerful enough to do a lot with it. So you're not gonna outgrow this machine right away like some other weaker engravers where you just get a taste and then you really want to see what's out there. So like I mentioned, also there's a ton coming from them. Not to me, as in like just out. They're coming out with extension kits, they're coming out with enclosures. Hopefully they're going to do an air assist system. There isn't one that's specific to this machine. You can buy aftermarket ones and adapt them. I've already seen a couple people do that, and it seems like if you're going to be doing much with this machine, that's what you want to do. You definitely want to get an air pump on here, even if it's just literally zip tying it over there and having it sit somewhere separate. I think that's going to be a major game changer because of just how lasers affect wood. Having air there, helping you get rid of that flame is going to be a big deal. All right, guys, that's it for me. I hope that I have introduced you properly to such machines, and I hope you guys are excited as I am about this type of thing. If you are at all, go ahead and give it a like, comment down below. Let me know what your thoughts. If you guys have any questions specific to this, I think I'm gonna get the other software and continue learning and go from there. All right, guys, go ahead and hop into our Discord if you need any help with 3D printing, if you want to discuss things like this. Lots of people in there helping each other, sharing 3D prints. It is an awesome community we're building over there, and I'm really happy the way the Discord is going and where it's headed. Definitely a great platform for us, for this channel, and for the subscribers to this channel. Also, check out Patreon, where you see videos first, where you get to comment and talk to me directly. Definitely check out Patreon, and thank you to all my patrons. You'll see their names to the Plus members in the outro to this video. All right, without further ado, I will let you go. Thank you all, and as always, see you in the comments. Later.